Welcome to Then There's California, our podcast featuring members of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus discussing their lives, legislative priorities, policy, and other issues that help make California exceptional. Hi, I'm Brian Green. It was nearly 4 years ago, in 2016, that a UC Berkeley-based advocacy group, Students United for Reproductive Justice, began noticing that the Student Health Center on their University of California campus did not offer the abortion pill as a safe alternative for ending an unplanned pregnancy. Female Cal students who were members of that reproductive justice group thought, why isn't this a service? As we will hear on this edition of Then There's California, that is an apparently all too familiar story for many female students trying to access abortion services on California's public university campuses, even in a progressive state like California, which is notable for having some of the best abortion access in the country. But, in fact, none of California's public universities provide on-campus abortion services of any kind to these students in need. That's about to change. State Senator Connie Leyva, the chair of the California State Legislature's Women's Caucus, heard about the family planning deficiencies at public university student health centers across the state, and then she authored what ultimately became SB 24, the College Student Right to Access Act, to help lift some of the emotional and logistical burden for the nearly 500 California public university students a month who have no choice but to seek access to the abortion pill at off-site health centers because their college health center doesn't provide it. One of those nearly 500 undergrads who had no choice but to seek off-site, outside care to end an unplanned pregnancy while a junior in college is with us right now and will tell us her abortion story in the hopes of encouraging other young women facing those decisions that it doesn't have to be this way. Jessie Rosales is a 2018 graduate of the University of California, Riverside, and Jessie is currently a campus coordinator with the Just Care campaign at the Women's Foundation of California and an abortion storyteller through the National Network of Abortion Fund's We Testify program. Jessie Rosales, welcome to Then There's California. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
And the backstory of SB 24 and the fight for reproductive access in California's public university campuses cannot be fully, authentically detailed without the input, the tenacity, and the complement of its author, the peerless and fearless State Senator Connie Leyva of Chino, who, in addition to her leadership of the Legislative Women's Caucus, is also the chair of the Senate Education Committee, one of my favorite co-hosts and guests. Welcome back to Then There's California, and thank you for having us here in your Pomona District office.
Thank you, Brian. Very happy to be here and excited to talk about SB 24.
I have been just amazed on the extraordinary coverage that this bill has received in the last couple of years, not only from the mainstream press, but the campus press. All of them are opining and writing about this bill because it is very personal.
Well, the students are really the backbone of this bill, and the students are the reason we got this bill to the governor's desk twice, but got it signed into law this year by Governor Newsom, and they have just been amazing. I think part of the reason it's garnered so much attention is because we are the first state that will offer medicated abortion on campus. So it's very exciting. But I defer to Jessie because she's one of the student leaders and we couldn't have done it without her.
And Jessie, I'm assuming you're not surprised to see that kind of reaction on campus, right? From the campus press in particular.
No, I wasn't surprised at all to see all of the campuses kind of coming together and talking about this issue. Like, every student that I got to work with was just super excited and super passionate to get behind this and just asked, how do I get involved? Like, how do I get behind this? So I'm not surprised by it at all.
And Senator, let's point out, this bill is actually in its second reincarnation, if you will, because it was vetoed the first time by Governor Jerry Brown, who in fact had said, not needed, we have all of these abortion centers, this pill is easily accessible. As one opponent said, it's just a $5 Uber ride to your nearest clinic to get medicated abortion. Talk about that transformation coming from Jerry Brown's veto to Gavin Newsom's signature.
Well, some of the things that were said throughout this whole time were quite insulting to women in general, being that it's only a $5 Uber ride. Just because you have a right, if you don't have access to it, it's really no right at all. And what we heard from these college students is, I'm going to have to miss school, I'm going to have to miss classes, I'm going to have to miss work, I have to find a center near me. And this is when a young woman finds herself in a situation, a young student finds themselves in a situation where they've made a decision to terminate their pregnancy. They want to make it happen. They want to get it done and not have it be difficult. And I think what I remember from 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago when we started this, is thinking, when we get this signed into law, people will look back and say, wow, there was a time when medicated abortion wasn't offered on campus. I can't believe that. So I understand that the new normal is hard for people at first, but this is just about making sure women can fully participate in life and choose when they want to incorporate a family into their life. So I couldn't be happier that Governor Newsom, he was lieutenant governor and said he would not have vetoed that bill, and I appreciate that he kept his word and signed it into law this year.
Jesse, I know you were very disappointed that Governor Brown vetoed the first incarnation, correct?
Yeah. And I think much to what Senator Leyva said about how a person trying to go through that situation will go through anything when they've come to that decision just to make sure that they have their health care. That was exactly my scenario. I didn't have any access at all, and I think to kind of expand a little bit more on your point that just another white dude yes. telling people who can reproduce what they can do with their bodies, as a female, as a Latina, as a child of immigrants, what that really meant for me when trying to access abortion care was, for one, because my parents were immigrants, I never really grew up going to the doctor's office very much and understanding what are the right questions to ask your doctor, or understanding insurance jargon or anything like that. I never knew what that was like or what it was even like to have medical insurance, to be honest. So having to navigate having the UC SHIP, which is the UC Student Health Insurance Plan, getting the referrals to get abortion care, and then, of course, being all of these identities also meant that I'm a low-income student at the time, so I didn't have a car, I didn't have money to get an appointment. So all of these things are factored into making your decision and into getting your health care that I don't think people really realize at the surface level. So yeah, and that's just my story, along with the 500 other students that said that they were seeking some sort of abortion care, and along with the other students that I met who personally shared their stories with me. Every circumstance is very specific and experiences are unique to people. So to have a former governor say, this is unnecessary, is just ridiculous to me.
I want to pick up a little bit on what you said about health care. And I've heard from so many students that when they get to campus, when they get to college, this may be the first time they have access to actual health care. So to your point, Jesse, when you found out that you were pregnant and you wanted to end your pregnancy, you don't really even know how to access health care because you haven't had it. Right. So why would we not make sure that this is available right there on campus, where students can just walk across campus to the health center and say, hey, this is the situation I'm in, this is what I would like to do? Because again, if you can have a right, but if you don't have access to that right, it's not like having a right at all.
That's exactly what I was saying for the longest time, that without access to my rights, what rights did I really have? It wasn't there, it didn't exist. So yeah.
And what I found through this is mostly it was women making these decisions by themselves and deciding that they wanted to end their pregnancy, and they were usually doing it by themselves. So to me, it's about making sure women have access, and it started out as being about access, but then as we worked more on the bill, it became also about stopping women from feeling shamed. And it's just incredible. The pro-life people, we're not telling anyone to have an abortion. You don't have to have one. But if you choose to, you should have access to that. And the shame that women are made to feel for having an abortion, I think is just wrong. And so for me, it kind of became this crusade to make it okay to say, yes, I had an abortion, or yes, I'm seeking an abortion. And Jesse, you're wearing a shirt that I love. You wore it in the Capitol, and it says, everyone loves someone who's had an abortion. And I just think that is so accurate. The pro-life people act like if we eliminate access, then women will stop having abortions. That's just not true. What will happen is women will die, and we will go back to the dark ages, because women are going to be in their pregnancy one way or another. So this is about making it safe and for letting women decide what they're going to do with their body. So we just always are grateful to you, Jesse. You did such a great job during testimony, and we thank you on air.
No, and we thank you for championing the bill and just carrying this on, which leads me to a couple of things. What was it that made you want to file this bill and want to do it again, you know?
So When I was approached to carry this bill, a couple things. One is we have UC Berkeley students who had done everything they needed to do, gathered signatures, went to administration, and then were denied that right by administration. So I thought, well, that's not right. But then also seeing everything that was happening nationally, which has only gotten worse since we first introduced the bill, and the fact that we have an administration in Washington that continues to appoint conservative judges who want to eliminate and take away a woman's right to have an abortion, it made me feel very passionate that we had to do something more in California, and that we had to make sure that students had access. Because when I read the statistic that more than 500 women per month sought a medicated abortion, I thought, well, there's absolutely a need for this. Right. So I was very excited to be able to champion something that I'm passionate about, a woman's right to choose, and also to make sure that this is offered on all of our campuses.
No, I agree, and I love that. And then another thing that you mentioned before, so I kind of want to go back a little bit to the stigma piece that you talked about. It's something that I saw too as like we were kind of going through this campaign is like evolving social justice movement that we were kind of creating. And in it I saw like this opportunity to bust stigma by like providing more access. And I guess I want to hear from you what you felt was the most stigmatizing part in seeing all these numbers and seeing this lack of access on these California campuses.
I think there's just a stigma with the word abortion, and people don't want to use the word. And I think that by just saying it and using it in the proper context helps to eliminate that stigma, and then also just making sure that women know that you're still loved and that you are making a choice for you, for your family. And hearing women come to me and say, you know, I have 2 children, and when I got pregnant with my third, I had to get an abortion because I knew I couldn't afford a third child. And what also really bothers me is mostly men on social media will say such horrible things about women. Oh, well, why doesn't she just keep her legs crossed? Or why doesn't she practice birth control? And the ignorance that is out there. I have not talked to one woman yet who said, oh yeah, I was just running around sleeping with everybody I could find and I got pregnant. 99% of the time it is women who are on birth control, using some form of birth control, and they accidentally got pregnant. And so why shouldn't that woman have access to an abortion, a safe, medicated abortion? So I think that the stigma of having an abortion is generations old. I hope that we can help change that by saying, you know what, it's okay. It is your right. And having a medicated abortion happens within the first 10 weeks of the pregnancy. So it's theoretically easier on the woman's body, and we have to be okay talking about it. And through these 3.5 years, people have been very ugly to me. They've been very ugly to my staff. But you know what? I really don't care, because I feel like this is a woman's right, and if you can't stand up and fight for someone's rights, then who are you really?
I love that.
Jesse, you are an abortion storyteller. Tell me about the unique part of being an abortion storyteller, taking your personal story and turning it into a story to share with the rest of the world.
The first reaction I get when I tell people, like, I'm an abortion storyteller, is that they're like, what the hell is that? You know?
What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that even mean? So just to like break it down, it pretty much is like what it sounds like. I share my story. And actually the first time I ever shared my story was at the Capitol in Sabrina Cervantes' office, and we were lobbying, and I remember that first time I just broke down. I just was sobbing and crying, retelling my story. And I guess the reason I decided to share my story was because I remember how isolating it felt to feel like I was the only one in my friend group, the only one on campus trying to access abortion care or having had an abortion. But I still felt that stigma that we were just talking about, right? Like that stigma is a huge, huge beast.
Yep.
And it manifests itself in many different ways. And so I started sharing for younger Jessie, you know, I started sharing for her and for others because I knew I couldn't have been the only one.
And I just have to talk about how great you were in committee. And because, everyone has their belief system, that is fine, but you don't have to demean others while believing in what you believe in. And I remember the first time you testified in committee, and I was at the podium, you were on my left, and the woman testifying against the bill was on my right. And you just did such a great job. You were so strong, you were so stoic, because you remember there were hundreds of people there that were against the bill. And, for you to be there and be so strong and tell your story, that's why we were able to get the bill to the governor's desk. So I will always be grateful to you for your strength and your courage to come forward and making it easier for other young women to come forward and know that they're not alone.
Yeah, of course. That's like the biggest thing, is that I don't want anyone to feel alone. And as our research shows, they're not alone at all, but no one's talking about it.
But no one's talking about it, Jesse. That's exactly right. And I think that's part of what contributes to the stigma. And for you to be brave enough to tell your story, you're making other women brave, and you're going to help end the stigma. So. And
then you yourself as a senator, I feel that a lot of people in politics kind of beat around the bush. They say, this is pro-choice legislation, or this is reproductive right legislation. And for you to go up there and say, I think you mentioned once that people talk about abortion when we really should be amplifying the word abortion and be completely unapologetic. So I think we made a great team.
I think we made a great team too. I totally agree.
It is a privilege to be an eyewitness to this team here. Jesse, how do you keep the older Jesse from starting to feel that the story is just rote? As you tell it each time, is it still personal, or does it often feel like you're talking about somebody different?
It just depends, really. I think if anyone's ever gone through an abortion, he'd probably tell you that, some days you feel, okay, all right, yeah, I had an abortion and I'm talking about it. And then there's other days where it gets a little tough and you relive these memories and these emotions. And although I will never regret my abortion, there are certain things that come up when you're telling your story and you remember, and you're just kind of brought back to that place. Recently, for our past committee hearings, I had to step down for a little bit, because it just got a little emotional for me, and I couldn't really do it because the antis, they find your social media, they find a way to you, and so it was just a lot of that happening, a lot of just sort of reliving my past and not the present, because I think in the present, current Jesse can kind of reap the benefits of having made that decision for myself and claiming my bodily autonomy. But past Jesse, she's still living in that moment, and she's still afraid and scared, and those emotions come up sometimes. And so I think it's a very interesting and unique experience. Some days are better than others.
And I think for me, authoring this legislation, I don't want a young woman to feel how you felt. I want a young woman or a student to say, I made the choice to, in my pregnancy, I'm going to have an abortion. I'm going to walk across campus, and I'm going to handle this right now today.
Right.
Versus how hard it was for you and for so many hundreds of others. So when you make that decision, in your story, when you talk about how long it took, and that because it took so long, you couldn't have a medicated abortion, you had to have a surgical abortion. My hope is that with this bill, there will be less emotions, and you will be able to heal faster. Because once the decision's made, the decision's made. It's going to happen. So my hope is to lessen that emotional distress for young women.
Just for context for folks who are listening, we partnered up with Answer, Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health, to get all of our research. They also have another set of research talking about the mental health, or how your mental health is affected by getting an abortion. And there's no significant rise or dip in your mental health if you are seeking an abortion, but there is one when your abortion care is delayed. And so, for context, it took me 3 months to get my abortion, right? So that's the part that's hard. And that's why I say, I'll never regret having the abortion, but the fact that it took me this long, or that it had taken me this long to get the care that I deserved, that was my right, that's the hard part, And when antis don't see it that way, or refuse to see it that way, really, I think that's the hard part.
I totally agree. And 3 months, once you've made a decision, that is just ridiculous. And you're in the state of California, where we are the most progressive state. It should not be that difficult.
Right.
So because of your courage and with the governor's signature, hopefully no other young student will go through that same situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Jessie, tell us your abortion story, as you say. Listening to you talk about it, you're very authoritative. Tell us your story.
I guess just to start and to give context, I was in a committed relationship at the time, was on birth control. And I will say, like, that to me doesn't matter. If you get pregnant and you weren't on birth control and abortion is your birth control, like, more power to you. If you're not in a committed relationship, you got pregnant and you want to get an abortion, more power to you.
And let me just jump in and say, because, you know, we always talk about guys sowing their wild oats and whatnot, and we're worried about whatever. But you know what? It's like it's not okay for women to have sex.
Right,
exactly. And God forbid you enjoy sex. But if you get pregnant and it's an unwanted pregnancy, regardless if you were on birth control or not, it all falls on you.
Like, enjoy your life.
Yes.
And take care of your life. But anyway, so I was a third year in college when I started to notice that I was feeling sick. And I was really healthy at the time, super fit. I was like, no, I'm sick. I'm sick. There's no way it could be something else. So I went to my student health center and was telling the doctor, like, I have like some sort of nausea. My stomach is kind of unwell. These are my symptoms. And so despite having told them, like, I'm using protection and all of that, they were like, we want you to take a pregnancy test. And so I said, sure, we'll take the test amongst others. And then the pregnancy test came out positive. At that point, I knew my options, right? I was like, okay, I can follow through with the pregnancy, give up for adoption, go to term, and start this new journey as a mother, or I could choose to terminate the pregnancy. And so there was no, like, hesitation in my mind. I knew going into college that if this exact scenario were to happen, I was going to terminate the pregnancy. And so once I told my doctor that, they, like, asked me, are you sure? Twice, which rubbed me the wrong way. But nevertheless, they then referred me then to a women's health specialist, still at the UCR Student Health Center. And then from there, it was maybe a week later. So again, time is passing. And I go to the Women's Health Center specialist, and I tell them what I've decided. So they give me 3 different referrals to 3 different facilities. And so in my mind, I imagine that referrals were given to you based on where your insurance works. I assumed that they had me on file. They knew I was on UC SHIP and all of that. So I thought these referrals were fine. I get home and I call the first facility to make an appointment. It had like the UC Riverside logo. I was like, oh yeah, this is like safe. This is like where I want to go. I call and I tell them my situation, and I tell them that I'm seeking an abortion. And on the other line, they say, we don't offer pregnancy terminations. We don't offer abortion services. Sorry, we can't help you. And I said, no, you're mistaken. I was referred to you all by my student health center. And they said, we know you're not the first student to be referred to us either. We've talked to your student health center, and we don't know why they keep sending students here. I remember that very clearly because I was just so shocked. And so I was just confused and dazed. And so eventually got to calling a second facility from the 3 referrals that I got. And that one seemed a little bit more promising. They said that they could schedule my appointment, that they can have it done. However, it was like really busy, so there was a bit of a waiting period for folks. And again, like, a lot of the scheduling conflicts with my schedule because I'm a student and I'm working and I'm running an organization and I'm, doing all these things. So on top of their waiting period, having it, work with my schedule, which was around right before finals. So it was a really important time for me to get everything good to go so that I could graduate with great grades. And so I don't exactly remember how long that waiting period was, but a week before that scheduled appointment, they call me back and they tell me, we can't process your insurance. I said, no, you're mistaken. I have UC SHIP. There's no way. And so what the person on the other end of the line told me to do is that if I wanted to get any kind of abortion care is that I had to go back home to my hometown in Orange County, which is about an hour outside of Riverside, and get re-diagnosed, quote unquote, and ask my family physician for help from there. I didn't have that relationship with my parents where I could talk to them and tell them, like, hey, I'm active, and on top of that, I'm pregnant, and on top of that, I'm seeking an abortion.
Right.
So a bit of a sticky situation, and I also had no car to get back. And so after that, I just kind of lost trust. This whole time, I had been silent about my situation, and I didn't want to tell anybody about it. Although I was in this safe pro-choice space, I was like, oh no, it can't be me, like, not me, like, I'm not that person, quote unquote. And so it kept me silent for the longest time, but eventually I just had to tell a friend, and they were like, dude, like, you kind of do this work with this one organization called Planned Parenthood. They kind of specialize in, like,
they might be able to help you.
Yeah. And I was like, yes, but my referrals. And it was literally the day before I was supposed to go back home for winter break that I got my procedure done. And I just had to, like, go home and act like nothing had happened. And yeah, and so basically, just to kind of tie things up a little bit better, I had gone to my student health center like early September, and I wasn't able to get my procedure done until December. Even though once I got into the Planned Parenthood, they said, you must have conceived sometime late August. So I caught it relatively early, pretty much in time to have had medication abortion or the abortion pill. But still, because of all these, like, hurdles, and because none of those services were provided on my campus, I had to go through this, like, harrowing journey, this, like, terrible, like, 3-month period.
And I think what people forget in all of this is having a child and becoming a mom is a really big deal.
Right.
And it's for a lifetime. And if you feel that you're not ready, then that you are being a smart person. You are being a responsible person. But yet we make the woman feel like she has done something horrible.
Right. Like, I knew, like, I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Like, I had a dog, and she was, that's
that was
my
enough.
limit. Yeah. Like, how much I could take care of at once. But yeah, you're right. Like, even now that I have, like, a job and, I got the degree, like, I don't think I'm anywhere ready to, like, take care of a child. And, like, 2-3 years ago, like, definitely not. We both would have been just
a mess.
Let's talk about the both part. The reaction from your then partner at the time to your news, and also about your family. You had mentioned that you didn't think it was something you could share with your family at that time, but finally you did, and you found out some interesting story from your mom's side of it.
Right. So we'll start with my then partner. I want to say he's no longer my partner. Current partner is amazing.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Super supportive. If he could have the abortion for me, he would.
Right on.
But my then partner, when I first told him, his immediate reaction was, okay, let's not tell anybody. And being young and naive, I was like, sure, I'll protect your reputation.
Right.
Yeah.
God, and I feel like so many times that's what happens to women.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, fine, we won't talk about it. At the same time, though, he was never, like, checking in on me emotionally and seeing how I was doing. Like, he benefits from my abortion.
Absolutely.
Like, 100%.
Nobody ever talks about that, right?
Right.
All of these men who think that women shouldn't have access to an abortion, how many of them have benefited because they're not raising a child? They're not paying child support.
Right.
Or, like you said, he's worried about his reputation. Let's not tell anybody. Well, guess what? He can walk around and no one knows. If
Exactly.
a woman continues her pregnancy, not too short a time, people know what's going on.
And I think that that's very important to bring up here. Young guys at that age are 20 going on 12, and I'm sure it was a shock to him. But his reaction, should there be in this process some more education for the young men to learn not only the biological process, but also to support their partners in crisis?
God, yes. We have so much work to do.
Let me pull out my list.
Yeah.
Yes. And we don't do a good job of educating our young men and young women, but especially the young men. Like I said earlier, young guys go out in there and sow those oats, and, he's just being a guy, and that's what guys do. But we don't ever tell them that, hey, there could be consequences to your actions. You could be on birth control using contraceptives and your partner could wind up pregnant. You need to be there for her. You need to be there and say, okay, let's make a decision together. Let's decide what we want to do together. And I've found through this process, that's just not what happens. It is generally 90% of the time the woman who is making the decision, who is making the hard choice alone. They're there to have the fun, but then when things get serious, are they around? Most times not.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think also that it kind of even goes back a little bit further, right? Kind of what you said, that if we're like speaking in a binary, men and women, like women too are also not prepared with all the facts. I know, like growing up myself, and again, this might have to do with my identities, again, being like child of immigrants, Latina, right? Like I never got the sex talk. And so a lot of these things I had to figure it out for myself. And like, I feel like I'm one of the lucky ones in which I like found really good resources and found factual knowledge. And I didn't fall for the scare tactics that actually my high school taught.
Wow.
Yeah, I think like when I was taught sex ed, no one ever talked about abortion. No one ever talked about emergency contraceptive even, and what that is and what it does, and birth control. Like that wasn't really talked about, and like the different kinds of birth controls and what it can do. So I think it comes down to starting at a young age, like talking about this is what sex is. This is what happens when a man and a woman have sex.
Yes.
This could happen, and know that you have options. You know, it shouldn't be framed as in like, this is the consequence, therefore don't have sex, right?
That's
because you don't want to have a baby.
That's exactly right.
It should be, these are your choices. So I think it goes for everyone to like know and understand that. But also I think that, a lot of men benefit from women taking the responsibility of taking charge of like our reproductive lives, and yet policies make it so difficult for us to take care of them, to take charge.
So many of those policies are created by men.
Right.
When we look across the country and we see all of the roadblocks to women having a safe abortion, it's not women authoring that legislation, it's men authoring that legislation.
Right.
And I could not agree with you more about sex education. We do not do a good enough job of educating our young people. There's so many myths out there. Oh, you can't get pregnant the first time. Oh, you can't get pregnant if you're on top. And no one wants to talk about that. I was that mom that told my girls everything, and when they didn't want to listen, I put them in the car and we drove so they couldn't get out. But you know, I know that I am a minority in that, because it is uncomfortable when you look at your two little girls and they're growing into women, and you just think about, oh, they're not my little girls anymore, but you want to make sure they're armed with the right information. So if parents aren't going to have those conversations, then we need to do a better job in schools in educating our young people.
And Senator, you had mentioned you got pregnant in college. Obviously, your circumstances, whatever they were different than Jesse's were a year or so ago. But talk about the decisions that you faced, the impact of that, the boundaries, the burdens, the doors closed or opened that you've dealt with circa the years you were on campus.
Absolutely. So when I got married halfway through college, and I tell everyone, you can do it, but I wouldn't recommend it. It just makes it take longer, your college days. But then I found out I was pregnant, and we weren't trying, and then I found out we were having twins. And so I graduated from college 6 months pregnant with our twins. And for us, it was a different situation. We were married. We'd been married for almost 4 years. And so, I chose not to terminate my pregnancy. But, oh, wow, it was, when I graduated and, here's my degree. It wasn't what I thought I was going to do. I wasn't going to work. Instead, I was home for 2 years taking care of these infant twins. And it worked out okay for me. But again, it goes back to choice. That was my choice. You made your choice. Neither one of us is wrong. Neither one of us is better than the other. That's what this is all about. It's about women deciding when to incorporate a family into their life and not having to wait 3 months to have an abortion when you have made that decision.
Yeah.
In Googling Jessie and learning about you, I was touched and also surprised learning that when you finally told your story to your mother, was her reaction the opposite of what you expected?
Oh, completely the opposite. So for the longest time, I didn't want to tell my parents that, I had an abortion. And I started with my mom because it felt easier at the time. And I sat her down and I was like, you know, you want to know what I'm doing, you want to know what exactly it is that I'm doing, and I keep pushing you out of my world, and that's not what I want to do, but here's why. And so when I told her, I mean, granted, it was like very emotional, and she was like, why didn't you tell me before? Like, why couldn't you come to me? And, you know, I explained everything that, like, listen, like, growing up, you never talked to me about sex. You didn't even talk to me about my period. Like, how was I going to feel safe talking about all these things? And so after all of that stuff kind of cleared out of the way, she was like, you know, I've had 2 abortions. What? Since when? She was like, yeah, 1 before you, and then 1 after you.
Wow.
And then she was like, it's normal. And she's like, and aren't you glad that you could do that here? Because she's Salvadorian. And so in El Salvador, you can get thrown into jail for having a miscarriage. Yep. So this kind of stuff is just like true and dear to her heart, as well as she like saw this stuff happen all the time. And she felt fortunate enough that she was able to get like abortion care when she got here, you know, and that she was able to plan for me and my little sister. And she, you know, exactly what you said, it's all about choice and how you want to plan your family. Yep. And so an abortion is just a part of family planning.
Yes.
Was there a connection that you had of trust between the 2 of you after she shared that story?
Yeah, you know, I feel like a lot of things I don't really like share with my parents, just because like I think in like the world of policy and like the world of like nonprofit work, like there's a lot of policy jargon.
Right.
And so it's kind of hard to like translate it, but I share what I can, and I feel like it did make us closer, and we actually did film a video together for Planned Parenthood, and we talked about sex for the first time on camera.
Oh my gosh, with your mom?
Yeah, with my mom.
Wow.
So that was fun, and then so the rest of the day after that, she was just asking me all these sex questions, and she's like, so do you do this? And like, what happens when this happens? And, you know, like all this stuff, you know?
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
So I definitely feel like it made us like feel comfortable talking about it.
That's great. But I love that you and your mom got to that point. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and like, it is like this like sick cycle of like having a culture in which we can't talk about it, but having a culture still where we sell sex, right? We see it everywhere.
Absolutely.
And even like going to what you're saying, right? Like we are sexual beings biologically, our purpose is to reproduce.
Yep.
And so those like funny urges that you get as a teenager, like it's so natural. It's
so normal.
So normal. These policies that are in place again that like keep you from like planning your family and like having any type of like bodily autonomy. And it's hard because a lot of it starts with our cultural perception of sex and all of that. So
I'm going to throw a little middle-aged male privilege in opposition to this. If I am the father of a female undergrad, how do you think I am going to feel by you promoting a political ideology that threatens to divide my family instead of truly looking out for the welfare of young women by discouraging them from ending the life of an unborn child? I know you've heard these arguments before, and I also know parental notification is not required in California right now, but you're sacrificing my daughter's safety and roadblocking the chance for me to have an opinion or have a say in this process.
So I would say that as the father, you don't have a say in your daughter's sex life, and you don't have a say in if your daughter chooses to have sex, and then if she gets pregnant and chooses to have an abortion. That is not your role as a parent. That is her choice. And that is part of the problem, and that is part of the culture that we face, that parents think that they have control over their children forever, and they really don't. And when you're in college, we allow our students to take out enormous amounts of debt so that they graduate, and who knows if they'll ever be able to pay it off, but yet we won't let them make decisions about their own body. So I think that we just have to realize that we can't have it both ways. You're either an adult and you're making your own decisions, or you're not.
I'm a little bit more like snarky with my dad, and I'm like a little bit more like, you can't tell me what to do. So I agree exactly with what you said, Senator, but also I'd also like to add that motherhood and giving birth to children is a lot more dangerous than having an abortion. And that's also something that we don't want to talk about or face the fact of. And yeah, it's no one's place to say. It's not even like you can have sex or you can't have sex, or this is what's going to happen to you if you have sex, then I'm going to make this decision for you. Like, no, not at all. Like, that decision is for me. And since when has anyone in like this father's life been there to interject on like the father's sex life, right? Like, I'm sure this father is freely able to, like, express his sexuality, whereas his daughter can't, and that's just ridiculous and unfair and unequal, and it's disgusting.
Senator, funding issues. Opponents have said that this bill is going to compel taxpayers to use public dollars to pay for abortions. But from what I understand, some private funders are coming in to pay for at least the implementation of this as the universities step up and provide this service, right?
Absolutely. We have these amazing funders who believe in a woman's right to choose and having access to a safe abortion. So each campus will receive $200,000 to make sure that they have the equipment necessary to determine if a woman is less than 10 weeks pregnant so that she can have a medicated abortion. And then each university system will get an additional $200,000 so that they, if they want to put in a hotline, whatever they want to do, they can do that. Something that we found that these campuses didn't want to do is they didn't want to bill. And they can bill for these services and actually make their health centers better in so many ways. But I would also say when people say that taxpayers would be paying for abortions, taxpayers already pay for abortions. It's called Medi-Cal.
What are the health centers to that point saying? Are they supportive of this bill?
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. We have some campuses that are, hey, let's go, we're ready. Janet Napolitano, the president of the UC system, actually sent us a letter that said we are not going to wait the 3 years for implementation. We will be ready to go in 2020. But I will also tell you that, and I won't name the campus, but when my staff, when we first introduced this bill, and one of the reasons we initially made it a 2-year bill is we found out that so many of the health centers are so different. Some are state-of-the-art, they're fabulous. Others are like a closet, a chair, and here's an aspirin, call us in the morning. But one of the health centers on one of the campuses my staff visited, they actually said to them, shame on you. Shame on you for trying to provide this service at these campuses. So, you know, not only have I taken hits, has Jesse taken hits, my staff has borne the brunt of some negativity. But you know what? We persisted. And I think with President Napolitano coming out and saying the UCs will jump on board and handle this quickly, that's very positive. We have not heard from the CSUs, but they have their marching orders.
I so much appreciate you talking about this on this podcast. How has it been for you personally sharing this, the healing that's coming about, and also the reaction that you're getting from students and young people like yourself?
It's been really beautiful to be cheesy and to be sappy, but it's true. It's been very beautiful to, like, work on a bill like this that is so deeply personal to me, and then it's just incredible, like, because I'm not going to benefit from this, and even the seniors and juniors who are working on this with us, like, no one really is going to benefit from it personally or, like, firsthand, but there will be generations to come who will, and I think that's been so beautiful to see that everyone's coming together to, like, be so selfless and just do the right thing. And then also, part of the reasons why I started sharing my story and have decided to continue to share my story is this community that I've been able to be a part of other storytellers. And there are other students who were emboldened after, like, listening to me, like, share my story, that came forward and, like, pulled me aside and said, I need to get this off my chest too. And, like, just being able to, like, have those people in my network and, like, those stories in my heart have just been, like, amazing and so rewarding for, like, for everyone else who's, like, fighting for this and hearing their stories. And it's been incredible, and I hope it also just continues to encourage people to talk about, like, yeah, an abortion, and it's so normal.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Speaking of future generations, I want to publicly say congratulations to Connie Leyva, who is now a grandmother and a mother-in-law. You have had a busy fall, so Jesse and Allie, your twins, have made life busy for you. But congratulations on having a beautiful granddaughter.
Thank you.
And it makes me want to think, as this bill came to fruition, particularly this last year, with little Lizzie now in your life, was the pending birth of your granddaughter sort of present in your mind? I know you're doing it for girls like Lizzie, but were you thinking about this through this process?
You know, when our girls were in college, and I always said to them, if you get pregnant, come talk to me, and I will help you make whatever decision. I will be there with you, whatever you decide. And with my daughter being pregnant, when we were getting this to the governor's desk and signed, it just made me feel more passionate about women deciding when they were going to incorporate incorporate a family into their life. And so for my daughter and son-in-law, this was the right time. It was their choice, and we have beautiful little Lizzie in our life. And if it wasn't the right time, I would have supported whatever decision that my daughter made. I feel so lucky to get to champion women's rights. And like Jesse was saying, we personally may not see the benefit of this, but that's what activism is about.
Right.
And it makes me so proud of you and all of the students that you found your voice and you're making a difference in the world and you're changing the world. You give me hope for the world. So I think that we have done a good thing, and we'll do more.
What's next for you, Jesse? Continuing your advocacy work for the organizations, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, so Just Care is a coalition of different nonprofits and groups and organizations that have been working tirelessly and effortlessly along the side of Senator Leyva in trying to push forth this bill, but also we keep a reproductive justice lens to our work. And so what that means is that we try to make sure that we go by the 3 basic pillars of reproductive justice of like everyone has the right to child, the right to not child, and then the right to raise that child with dignity and respect with accessible resources and sustainable communities. And so that dives into a much larger conversation. But what it also means is that we want to make sure that a lot of these campuses are safe for folks to talk about abortion. It also means that like our trans students are also getting holistic abortion care if they need to do so and if they choose to do so. Our non-binary students, our immigrant students as well. So we want to make sure that it's like an equal playing field for everybody. What happens now is that implementation starts, and so we're working really diligently with folks who work in like the insurance field, like experts on insurance who could explain insurance jargon to me finally. And then we're working a lot with like abortion providers. We're working a lot with like the grant makers of this bill. And so we're just trying to make sure that every UC and CSU is ready for implementation. And that also means creating like a safe culture on the campus as well. So it's a lot of like grassroots organizing still, and it's a lot of like working with these like other big players that I never anticipated that I would work with, because when I was younger I'd go to like lobby days and I wanted to be you know, senator. I wanted to be the next senator or assembly member, and I wanted to like create policy. And I don't know what's next, because while I have this like love and passion and admiration for the work that you do, Senator, I also like am curious to see where this is going to take me. Podcasts are really fun.
They are. They
yeah.
are. Yes.
Yeah.
But you know, I think that's what I love seeing more than anything, is to see young women especially find their voice and then wonder, where is this going to take me?
Yeah.
And I'm very excited that you found your voice at a young age. I see so many women, they don't find their voice until they're much, much older. And so you're here, you're now, you're going to make a difference, whatever you choose to do, and you'll make the world a better place.
Jesse, if there is a young woman that happens to be listening to this podcast that is walking the same path that you were on just a year or so ago, what do you want to say to her right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would want this person to know that I know you feel alone. I know you feel like you're the only one going through this right now, but you are going to be okay. It doesn't feel okay right now. I promise it'll be okay. I promise you will find community. And if you don't find it in me. Reach out to me. I'll put you with community. But this is so normal. What is it, like 1 in 3, 1 in 4 women?
I think it's 1 in 4 women will have an abortion in their life.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's so normal. And around 60% of folks, this is according to Guttmacher, 60% of folks will get an abortion in their 20s.
Yeah.
So totally normal. And also a lot of like mothers are the ones who are also having abortions.
Yeah.
So if you are a teen mom and you're like, well, now I want an abortion too, like, it's okay. All situations and all circumstances, it's okay, and you will be okay.
Do you want to have kids someday when you're ready?
I don't know. I don't think I do.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
That is okay.
Yeah, it's not something, I feel like a lot of like people when they're younger, they kind of know, you know, they're like, I can't wait to be a mom, or they think of like their dream wedding, and like they think of like the sort of like that part of life, and I'm not there. I think of more of like, how do I get into Senator Leyva's shoes someday? Like, how do
Good.
I
love that. I love that. I will help you. And I think I want to reiterate what Brian just said. It is okay to not have children. I always say just because you can reproduce doesn't mean you should. You have to have a fishing license, but you don't have to have a license to have a child. And having a child is a lifetime commitment.
Yeah.
And it's not for everybody. But I think that's another thing. Society, there's a stigma. You don't want to have children.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with that. And we'll get you in my shoes. I got you.
Thank you so much, Senator Leyva, for championing this bill. And just like, you were always on fire, ready to like fight back with words, and just like you were just so quick and just so like eloquently done every time. And all of the students were obsessed with you and just were like, yes, it's Connie Leyva. Like, we're so excited.
You both are a dynamic duo. I'm glad you've had the privilege of working with each other on this to see this legislation passed and signed into law. And Jesse, bless you for your courage, and don't stop sharing your story. You are touching lives. It's really a privilege to have you with us on this podcast.
Thank you so
and
much.
Senator Leyva, congrats on being a grandma.
Thank you.
I know that Lizzie will grow up slightly spoiled, but very empowered.
Yes,
so.
both. I agree.
No, thank you so much for hosting us and
Brian.
talking about this bill. And it's a pleasure to have you back here on the podcast. And we will talk again in 2020 about other legislation coming up. Really a pleasure to have you both here on Then There's California.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you, Senator Leyva.
And that is it for this edition of Then There's California, a production of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus, with technical and production assistance and great ideas from Martin Ashley, Bob Brulte, Brian Shadden, and Rainier Sabiniano, John Roman, McLeana Woods, Lisa Murphy, and the graphic design talents of Tim Davis. From the 20th Senate District and from Senator Connie Leyva's district office in Pomona, on behalf of Senator Leyva, the chair of the Legislative Women's Caucus, and Jesse Rosales, who is the campus coordinator with the Just Care campaign at the Women's Foundation of California and also an abortion storyteller for Youth Testify, I'm Brian Green. Thanks for listening to us and joining us on Then There's California.